They are among the most recognizable human forms in archaeology, figures lying beneath the shadow of Vesuvius, apparently preserved at the instant an ancient city died. But the casts of Pompeii are not bodies turned to stone, and Pompeii was not erased in one sudden moment. The working title says a city was buried overnight. That is close enough to create an image, and too simple to explain what happened. In AD 79, Vesuvius produced a disaster that unfolded across many hours. Pumice fell, buildings failed, the eruption changed. Hot, ground-hugging currents crossed a landscape of cities, villas, farms, and roads. Pompeii and Herculaneum were both destroyed, but not in the same way. To reconstruct the event, we have two letters written decades later, layers of volcanic material, damaged buildings, human remains, and the choices of the archaeologists who uncovered them. Together, they tell a story more complex and more revealing than a city frozen in an instant. Pompeii was one part of a densely inhabited region around the Bay of Naples. It was a substantial commercial town. Herculaneum, closer to Vesuvius and the ancient shoreline, was smaller. Villas and settlements extended through places now known as Oplontis, Stabiae, and Boscoreale. The mountain above them had a violent history. But the people of the 1st century did not have instruments measuring magma, modern evacuation systems, or a scientific model of explosive volcanism. Earthquakes had affected the region, and repairs were still visible in AD 79. That does not mean residents understood those earthquakes as a countdown to a known eruption. Even the eruption's calendar date remains unsettled. The traditional date is 24 August, preserved in one influential manuscript reading of Pliny the Younger's letters. Other manuscript readings differ. A charcoal inscription at Pompeii bears the date 17th of October. A coin and other archaeological indicators also support an autumn event. Italy's National Geophysical Institute favors a date after early September, probably in late October or early November. Some current scholars still defend the August tradition. The secure statement is simpler. Vesuvius erupted in AD 79. The exact day and month remain a debate between copied texts and material evidence. Each clue answers a different question. A manuscript reading tells us what a copyist preserved, not automatically what Pliny first wrote. A coin can establish that the eruption came after the coin was issued, but not the exact day it began. A charcoal date is striking because charcoal writing was usually fragile, yet its survival and year still require interpretation. Seasonal food, clothing, and heating equipment add context without acting as a calendar on their own. The autumn case is cumulative, and that is why it remains evidence to weigh, not a solved riddle. Our only surviving written account comes from Pliny the Younger. He was at Misenum, across the bay, not inside Pompeii or Herculaneum. Decades later, he wrote two letters to the historian Tacitus. One recounts the journey and death of his uncle, Pliny the Elder. The other describes the younger Pliny's own experience at Misenum. The letters are indispensable, but they have limits. Pliny witnessed the eruption column and the changing conditions around Misenum. After his uncle sailed away, he relied on reports for what happened to him near Stabiae. These are crafted literary accounts, not a continuous scientific log of every town beneath Vesuvius. The deposits supply the missing physical sequence. In the first main phase, a sustained eruption column rose above Vesuvius. Pumice and ash fell across the region, with the wind carrying heavy fallout toward Pompeii. This was not lava. It was a prolonged fall of volcanic fragments from the column overhead. At Pompeii, the material accumulated for hours. Streets became harder to cross. Pumice collected on and within buildings. The shape of a roof could alter where the load gathered. Flatter roofs were especially vulnerable. Archaeologists have found collapsed tiles, walls, and human remains within the fall deposits. But the city did not experience one uniform depth or one identical chain of events. Buildings redirected material. Deposits varied from place to place. New stratigraphic work has identified pauses and layers that complicate the neat older picture of two uninterrupted phases. Some people had time to leave. The remains found by archaeologists represent those who did not escape, returned, sheltered, or were otherwise caught in the disaster, not the entire population. The long early phase and survivor research make it clear that Pompeii was not a city in which every inhabitant died in place. That changes how the early phase should be imagined. The city was not sealed the instant the column appeared. Conditions worsened while choices remained possible, though the evidence cannot tell us what every person knew at a given moment. Some routes may have become harder as material accumulated. Some buildings offered temporary cover while their roofs took on more weight. Later pauses visible in the deposits may even have created intervals in which people moved again. Archaeology can identify those changing conditions without assigning a decision or emotion to an unnamed individual. Then, the eruption changed. When parts of the eruption column could no longer remain aloft, they collapsed. That generated pyroclastic density currents, ground-hugging mixtures of hot gas, ash, and rock fragments moving outward from the volcano. Different currents could vary in concentration, temperature, speed, and destructive force. This second main phase would expose why Pompeii and Herculaneum cannot be treated as one city with two names. Herculaneum lay closer to Vesuvius on another side of the mountain's fallout pattern. It did not receive the same prolonged, heavy initial pumice accumulation as Pompeii. Its decisive destruction came through successive hot pyroclastic density currents. The deposits there reached extraordinary depths, about 20 meters in places according to the archaeological park. That deep burial helped preserve upper stories, wood, and other organic material in ways that differ from Pompeii. It also moved the ancient shoreline outward beneath volcanic deposits. In the 1980s, excavators working near that ancient shoreline found more than 300 human skeletons in and around arched waterfront spaces. This transformed the picture of Herculaneum. Yet the find does not give us the thoughts of those individuals. It does not prove that every person was waiting for a particular rescue or knew what would arrive from the sea. It tells us where they were found. The thermal effects of the currents at Herculaneum were severe. Scientific studies support extreme heat as a central lethal hazard there, but exact temperatures and speeds are reconstructed, and the same figure cannot be applied to every location or person. Respectful history does not need to turn physical suffering into spectacle. Pompeii's path was different. Its buildings had already endured hours of falling pumice. Later density currents crossed a damaged urban landscape and deposited ash among streets, houses, and collapsed structures. Some people had died during the fall phase. Others were found in deposits associated with the later currents. That distribution is why no single sentence can explain every death. Falling material, structural collapse, extreme heat, ash exposure, and the force and duration of different currents all mattered in different contexts. Posture alone cannot diagnose an individual cause. The word overnight captures one truth. Conditions changed catastrophically from one day into the next. Classic reconstruction places the major fallout across roughly 18 to 20 hours, but that is a scholarly model, not an observed stopwatch. Newer evidence complicates the boundaries. So the city was buried through the night, but not simply, quietly, or all at once. The eruption ended. The work of interpreting it had barely begun. The remains of more than 1,000 victims have been found at Pompeii. More than 300 were found at Herculaneum's waterfront. These numbers describe archaeological discoveries. They are not total death tolls for either town, and they cannot be added together to measure the disaster's full human cost. At Pompeii, burial produced a distinctive kind of evidence. In some areas, fine ash hardened around bodies and other organic material. After soft tissue decomposed, cavities remained in the deposits. Bones could remain inside those voids. Beginning in 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli systematized a method of filling some cavities with plaster. Later, excavators also used resin. Once the surrounding material was removed, the cast preserved the shape of the void, folds of clothing, bodily position, and sometimes objects caught within the deposit. A little over 100 human casts have been made, far fewer than the total remains found at Pompeii. The distinction is essential. A cast is neither a statue made in antiquity nor a body preserved whole. It is a modern archaeological intervention into a space left by decomposition. That intervention is powerful. It gives physical form to absence, but it can also tempt us to invent a story. A position may look peaceful, protective, terrified, or deliberate to a modern viewer. Without specific evidence, those impressions do not reveal consciousness, emotion, relationship, or final intention. The casts preserve extraordinary traces. They do not preserve a person's last thoughts. The modern image of Pompeii was shaped not only by Vesuvius, but by excavation. Organized exploration began at Herculaneum in 1738 and at Pompeii in 1748 under Bourbon rule. Early tunnels and excavations often pursued valuable objects and impressive works. Later, archaeologists developed more systematic recording, while Fiorelli's methods helped organize both the site and its evidence. Even before those excavations, parts of the buried landscape had been entered, salvaged, quarried, or reused. In modern times, exposure brought new damage from weather, war, restoration, vegetation, and tourism. The cities are exceptionally preserved, but they are not untouched time capsules sealed perfectly since AD 79. Excavation is therefore both discovery and irreversible change. Removing a deposit exposes a wall painting to air and water. Filling a body-shaped void preserves its form, but also creates a new object that did not exist in AD 79. Early records may omit details a modern archaeologist would consider essential. Conservation now has to protect buildings whose volcanic covering once sheltered them. The history of the site affects what evidence remains available and what questions can still be answered. What visitors see is the result of several histories layered together: Roman construction, volcanic destruction, burial, decay, salvage, excavation, casting, reconstruction, and conservation. Pliny shaped the written memory. The deposits shaped the scientific reconstruction. Archaeologists shaped what was revealed and how it was displayed. Pompeii is often described as a city frozen in time. The phrase explains its appeal and hides its transformation. The eruption did not stop a clock. It created a sequence of deposits, collapses, currents, absences, and survivals. Herculaneum preserved a different disaster beneath deeper layers. Pliny watched from across the bay. Centuries later, excavators turned voids into visible human forms. Those forms bring us close to individual lives, but not inside them. We can establish where remains were found, what surrounded them, and which hazards crossed a particular place. We cannot responsibly supply the words, motives, or emotions that the evidence did not preserve. That boundary does not weaken the story. It gives the victims something spectacle cannot: the dignity of not having their final moments invented for us. The city in the title was buried across a night. Understanding how it happened has taken nearly 2,000 years, and the evidence is still changing what we thought we knew.